And good morning, Frankston. Welcome back to our regular Friday Candid conversation at a slightly earlier time of 12 noon today. I hope you're enjoying Friday and looking forward to the weekend and looking forward hopefully to some relaxations being announced on Sunday. I'm really pleased today to have a special guest with us. Paul Edbrook, I'll get him to introduce himself in a moment, but welcome again, Peter Malone, Sue Baker, Brad Hill. As I said, I've reached out to many candidates across the city, but you guys have so far been the ones that have engaged the most. Today's topic, as advertised, is on government relations and advocacy and the role of council within that. And so I want to spend today talking about that and how we can do it better at Frankston. I should also note that Paul, whilst he is the local member for Frankston, as well as the Parliamentary Secretary for Police and Emergency Services and Parliamentary Secretary for Bushfire Recovery, I'd hate to see your business card, that this is not a partisan discussion. This is about looking at actually how we work with government as well. But I do thank you, Paul, for taking the time to come and talk to us today. Paul, perhaps you'd like to give a bit of an intro for those people that don't know you.
Well, thanks for that introduction there. I was elected in 2014, formerly a special school teacher in Frankston and a firefighter in Frankston for 14 years. And essentially, like yourselves, thought I could contribute to Frankston in a way that wasn't being done, and that was in, I guess, keeping the focus on Frankston, not on political parties and whatnot. So there's some people that know, some people that don't know. I actually wasn't a member of the Labor Party for very long prior to the election. I think that lent itself to the fact that, like yourselves, independence to a certain degree is a power you can bring to council. But so elected in 2014. You've all seen the projects we put through. I think we're up to, state is up to $1.5 billion invested in Frankston in 6 years, which is more than in the previous 60 years probably. From the stations, level crossings, the sporting clubs, to the brand new hospital that is very much needed in Frankston, worth $500 million, which went to expression of interest today. But with all that building that's been happening and should have been happening years ago, we've been playing catch up. There's a lot of smaller projects within the community that have been needed for a long time too, and we've had to get on them. They're not as attention grabbing or should I say sexy to the media, but when we're dealing with homelessness and mental health issues, you can't build Frankston and build a future for Frankston without bringing everyone along. So that's been my focus for the last couple of years, and I've been working with and many times around council to do that. I work with many councils in Victoria, many committees for Melbourne and Geelong and whatnot, Greater Frankston. But in my role as Parlsec for Police and Emergency Services and Bushfire Recovery, I work with Gippsland councils, city councils, and I see a lot of the way good councils are run and the way councils can be improved to make things better for ratepayers and more efficient as well.
Thanks very much, Paul. Now, I would imagine that a lot of your time is actually talking to lots of different municipalities. I know from my experience working in the not-for-profit sector, I spent a lot of time talking to parliamentarians, particularly in Canberra, but also occasionally at a state level as well. To what degree do you think Frankston Council compares to other similar councils in terms of how they actually advocate for their community and put forward sort of policy positions? Are they thinking before budgets and putting budget submissions in that are looking across the whole of the city and sort of coming up with kind of strategic ideas and those kinds of things?
Well, before I answer that question, can I just say thanks for the invite today. It's the first time, surprisingly, any candidates have asked me to come on a chat, and I find that a bit odd, seeing as most of what's happening in Frankston is state government funded or co-funded at the moment. So congratulations, Brad, Sue, Peter and Stephen, because it shows you've got your finger on the pulse about what your job will be if you're lucky enough to be elected and have the privilege of serving people in Frankston. And just wanted to take the time to thank all the councillors in Frankston Council that have been worth their salt this term, and specifically Sandra May and Brian Cuniel, who are former mayors who are retiring. And before I spoke about your independence is your power, that's certainly been something that's worked well with Sandra, and even Brian, who's a Liberal member, lifelong Liberal member. We work together very, very well, and it's a bit sad to see those councillors go, particularly after toxic behaviour that they have had to put up with. As far as, I guess, the question you've asked wants me to almost rate Frankston Council, and I can look. I'd like to keep the conversation positive, but I think you've got to call a spade, and when you've got, lots of councils have got problems. Casey's got huge problems at the moment, which is just next door. But when you've got monitors worth, over $100,000 to the ratepayers coming in to deal with what is relatively childish behaviour, that just, and that's what the public see. It's not what actually is going on behind meetings. When you've got a point where I have to escort my female, or they ask my female team members to their cars so they're not stalked by a councillor, and Parliamentary Services is saying don't let a certain councillor into your building. I think we've got some really difficult problems and we need to call them out. And Sandra, Brian, and a couple of other councillors have. But I think what it comes down to is, have we been operating at a level we should be? No, and it's because of the makeup of that 9 people who represent Frankston, because many of them have not been representing Frankston.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to open up to the floor, and perhaps, Sue, you'd like to kick off some reflections or questions of Paul around what approach you might take to working with the different levels of government.
Well, thank you. I've probably got a lot more questions than I have things to say at the moment. One of the things that's attracted me to putting myself up as a candidate is this notion of service. I've spent my career working with many different organisations in different industry sectors, manufacturing through to finance, IT, hospitality, tourism. I've been very privileged to do that. And in the majority of cases, it's been about working with executive teams to help them enable their teams to give better service to their customers. So that's both in terms of how people behave in the various roles they have, whether it's frontline, first line management, senior management, specialisms, experts. My role has been working with teams on the sort of people engagement side, and then how that marries in to deliver great policy, product, service. So the appeal with working for council is that I have a lot of experience in that field, and I see this level of government, and I probably wouldn't have called it government before starting to campaign, but this level of service being on council is about engaging people. So I guess one of my questions, Paul, is, how does council then engage with other stakeholders like state and federal government? What are the sort of communication channels that are expected, the working parties? How does that work so we can really capitalise on what you offer for then our customers, our community?
So this is the kind of question that for the last 4 years I've been waiting for one or two of our councillors to actually ask. I think it goes back to even a more basic question though, and I will answer your question. I'm not trying to get out of anything like that to the political thing, but it's about the fact that people have got to understand why they're actually in council and what councillors do and what council officers do, and what you're actually working with. So Brad, I know, was a former councillor. I know, I'm asking you though, Brad, what's around about when you're in council, what was the annual revenue or budget for council?
The budget of the council, it's about $180 million all up.
Yep.
So it's a lot of money.
It is. So their revenue last year, I think, was about 180. And I think when you come in to council, you've got to have the notion that the councillors are the board of a $180 million business, and that's serious money. That is serious money. And the stockholders are the people of Frankston who vote you in. And you've also got to know what the different levels of government do. Different levels of government have different responsibilities and different income streams. We've seen candidates in the past promise, $30 million projects. And I sit there waiting for them to come and ask federal or state, and we'll just be going, sorry, it's your promise. That's not quite your responsibility. Now you understand. And also you've got to ask the community. But, currently we've got, I think, someone promising to change early childhood education, and it's not a local government responsibility. Of course, it gets a bit more difficult with fed and state, where you've got health and education, co-funding and whatnot. But essentially the relationship, in answering your question, so the relationship between local, state and federal is levels of government is one that is so important. And if it's harmonious, not everyone will agree on things. That's democracy. But if it's harmonious, great things will happen for Frankston. If you get it wrong, then especially at a councillor level, Frankston suffers. And it's really important to be in touch with your local councillors, your state members and your federal members, because having that level of discussion is what brings that vision of Frankston to fruition. It's not a bunch of people arguing around a room and ignoring people and playing childish games.
Peter.
Yeah, look, it's great to have you on the show, Paul. As you might know, I come from a sort of a military background, but I'm also on a director on the board at Chisholm Institute. I look at the way we behave, I suppose, and interact with each other on the board at Chisholm. We have a chairperson, or I suppose is equivalent to a mayor. The directors are like the councillors. I see that, with my background, leadership and teamwork are really important. I don't know that that's been demonstrated in the council from what you've, from things that you've said, but in working with state government, there's, of course, areas of the local council, areas of the state government, predominantly state government, if not wholly. But would you think that there's a lot of advocacy that must go on between local council and state government? You're the local member. Is there any good examples of how to do this? Simply by coming to your office and talking, I guess, about proposals. That might be the simple answer, but are there good examples of that you can point out, or bad?
Look, how about I give you one or two of each? I think a really good base to start with is knowing that if you're elected, you're one of 9 councillors. So coming to my office or Peter Murphy, the federal member for Dunkley's office, and saying, hey, I've got an idea, we need to build this, doesn't cut the mustard. The ideas from council need to be voted on by a quorum in council and brought to us by the correct system. And that's happened many times. We've seen some things in the paper where I've said, sorry, no, that's not a council position. There's been some great advocacy for projects on council's behalf, and it's always been based on good community consultation as well, asking the ratepayers who vote you in what they actually want. Now, I will give you, can I give you a couple of really shoddy examples that have happened in the last year or so? And again, I think our strength is being positive and making community-based decisions, but this is the way that it hasn't been done properly. So, look, first example, you have Frankston Council put out a community consultation online page about whether we should have dogs in the CBD. Now, I don't know what you guys think about dogs in the CBD. I'm not going to tell you what I think. I'm a dog person, but it's about the evidence. So the feedback comes in that people do want dogs in the CBD. Business owners want dogs in the CBD. They believe they're losing business because people are taking their furry loved ones to cafes up and down Nepean Highway that allow dogs and give puppy chinos and all this kind of stuff. Now, over the years, there's a bunch of Facebook polls as well. Not one of them comes back negative. Not one of them comes back negative. But in the council chambers, we have a discussion that is based on a councillor, an individual councillor, bringing a jar of dog feces and putting it on the table and saying, this is the reason why we don't do this. That to me is not democracy. Now, I know democracy can be hard. You can't please everybody. But when your community is asked and you ignore them, that's another thing. Look, I think the level crossing removal at Sky Road was another really toxic issue. But, you know, on my behalf, I was very secure with where we stood because I door knocked every single house and business in that area more than once. And the overall, probably 90% of people overall wanted that. They said that was going to be an advantage for them. But we had council say, no, we don't want it this way. And they voted against it going over. Now, when I asked for some kind of evidence about, well, what did the community say to you? Because I'm hearing different. I got a petition that had 700 signatures on it. And when I went through the postcodes, because the postcodes are listed, more than 70% weren't from Frankston. You know, it was a generic campaign. So I think we've got to get back, and the council officers are very good at this, and often I think they're ignored for the detriment of Frankston, to get back and ask the community what they want, not just bring our own ideas in and say, hey, I mean, case in point at the moment would be, we've just put an expression of interest out for builders for the largest project ever on the peninsula and in Frankston Hospital. $562 million, 1,700 jobs to build it, more jobs for nurses and everything. How many councillors have you heard come out and say, we want this?
Zero.
Zero. And, you know, I speak to thousands of people every fortnight, and I can tell you what, people do want this.
Yes.
So what I guess I would like to see is there's a way to advocate for people, but it's not saying vote me in and I'll make the decisions for you.
Yeah.
You know, COVID, I can tell you now, COVID is going to make things more challenging going forward for every council, and we need strong councillors who can actually do that. The misunderstanding about advocacy too and community consultation isn't that you can please everyone either. I've got people ringing me up because they don't like decisions I make, but you've got to make decisions on the whole based on what most people are telling you that makes sense. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Brad, your reflections or comments, questions for Paul?
Yeah, look, I just, I guess half comment, half question. The council often will produce a top 5 priority advocacy list, and I guess, look, what's not visible to me is a consultation from the council to the community in assembling that, and there's some items on there that don't appear to be well thought out, that haven't really been fleshed out or had the implications considered. And I'm just wondering, Paul, when these are presented to you and the federal member for consideration for delivery for funding, what are you looking for in that? What on that list stacks up? What is it about it that doesn't? What's wrong with it? What's right with it?
That's a really interesting question. And I look for quite a few things. I look for, first and foremost, the community consultation. Who in the community is actually saying they want this? And I'll just take you back to the state and federal election, where the advocacy goals for Frankston Council actually changed. So I think during the state election, we had the marina, we had factual electrification, we had the regional tennis facility, which was in addition to the regional tennis facility already at Mornington and the 12 tennis clubs that need maintenance in Frankston already. But that even changed in a couple of months to the federal election. No longer at the federal election did we talk about a marina for some reason. Using this as an example, I can tell you, I didn't see any community consultation. My questions about the marina were, if you're going to put machinery near salt water with a lot of rocks, and it is going to blow out, the budget will blow out, no doubt. But you've got an idea of what the budget is, but you can't tell me about the project, and you can't tell me what environmental studies have been done. Well, I as a local MP, I find that very hard to take to a minister and say, hey, let's just plant this here. Yet that was the supposition at the forums that we were meant to speak at, to say, will you back this? And for some of these projects, I had to say no, because they just do not stack up. I'm not going to be the MP that without any environmental advice at all, takes a plan to the minister and says, can I please have funding to potentially ruin our best asset, Frankston Beach? Now, I'm not saying it would, but we need to do the research. And look, I think you can take from it what you will, but I certainly didn't back the tennis project. I didn't back the marina. I didn't back the tennis project either. The opposition did, and the margin in Frankston for state politics went from 0.49% to 9.7%. So that should tell you something about, I guess, how much backgrounding I do on these projects and how many conversations I have versus possibly 9 people in a room that sometimes it can seem like they're acting in a bubble. That's not to say we haven't had some great leaders in that council, but I don't know where some of these ideas come from.
I might ask just a supplementary question on that topic, if that's all right.
Well, it's like we're in Parliament now.
What I noticed that
your time's run out.
what I've noticed the council also does, they spend, I don't know, however much on a document with their top 5, and they put that out. Essentially, what appears to me, they chuck it up in the air and see what lands on the ground or what stays up in heaven. And then, a few weeks later, 1 or 2 meetings later, we have a notice of motion, let's ask the state government for this. And then the next meeting, let's ask the state government for that. To me, that seems really confusing, because it's either in the top 5 or it's not. Is it automatically low priority because it wasn't in the top 5, or does it replace something in the top 5? There doesn't appear to be any structure to me, and I'm just wondering if there's anything happening behind the scenes in that respect that's not visible to the public with these notices of motions asking for stuff to happen from state government.
Just before you answer that, Paul, if I can perhaps just add a little bit to that. So from my experience of doing advocacy and policy work and working with parliamentarians of all colours and particularly up in Canberra, is that if you're not consistent about your messaging and you keep flip-flopping on what your position is, then you're on a losing streak from the start.
You hit the nail on the head. Yeah. Look, you're absolutely right in the way that, let's take these notices of motion. And for people who don't know what a notice of motion is, it's an idea from a councillor that the council officers will look into, and it gets brought up at a council meeting. And at times I feel sorry for our council officers, because I work with them and they're bloody fantastic in the work they do. And if you're elected, please remember, and I go to the departments I work with this attitude, just because you're elected doesn't mean you're an expert in everything. Use the people around you. They know what they're doing. They're there for a reason. But, some of the notices of motion I get sent to me that have been passed by a councillor. I just don't know what to say at times. One that comes to mind is, what was it? The Seaford Seaford, there's a building at Seaford on the Seaford train line, and a notice of
Substation.
motion. Yeah, yep, substation. That's right. Notice of motion came up, and there's no, you'd expect a bit of chat between levels of government to say, look, this isn't a good idea. This is, and someone wanted to make it into a community centre. And my first question was, well, with the amount of probably asbestos and heavy metals and all that in a substation, you're going to end up knocking that down and building something on the site. Have you spoken to PTV? Have you done all the initial stuff? Nothing. But the hundreds of hours that officers have to take to do this stuff and present it is amazing. Another one that came up the other night was, I think it was one of the South Ward councils, in fact, the only South Ward councillor incumbent that's running, requesting $500,000 for sole traders for Frankston. And I sit there and I read these notes, and I'm just dumbfounded that maybe some people should start reading their briefs and listening to their officers. We've had that very day, we had council advertise as part of a $18 million business strategy from the state government that they were involved with it. Yeah. We've had $1,000 or $3,000 grants for eligible operators through the Sole Trader Support Fund, all the other things you've seen in the media, as well as a huge amount of money for mental health supports, all this kind of thing. And we have that kind of ask, and I'm sitting there going, it's already happening. Yet, here's the interesting thing. $6 million of a council recovery package. The question I want to ask is, I know the council officers are working on that really hard, but how much of that is being put out to the community that need it? And I think sometimes it's about knowing your own job and getting that done, instead of always feeling like you're the lobbyist for the state or federal government, because you're not. Your advocacy is very, very valuable, but the people in Frankston need to be listened to, and they want their opinions acted on.
Yeah. We're getting some comments and questions from the people who are watching us, but before I come on to those, and I'd just like to acknowledge Oliver Hill, the candidate for West Ward.
Great.
Is a frequent viewer.
Is that the Jim Henson Muppet?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure Oliver likes being called a Muppet, but
my apologies.
Yeah, let's not knock the stuffing out of Oliver now. But the one of the things that I'd like to go back to, Sue and Peter and Brad as well. One of the things that I'm really conscious of, and if I look back, and I don't want to talk about the current council, I want to talk about the future council. But one of the things that strikes me is there has been, in terms of relationship with both federal and state government, a lot of grandstanding, a lot of kind of, shouting at people and these kinds of things, and, writing letters of complaint and all this kind of stuff. From my experience, and, I've been involved in advocacy for, almost 15 years now, is that shouting out should be the last resort. The first resort should always be sit down, have a respectful conversation. I know on occasion in some of the stuff that I do on the volunteer firefighting side, Paul, you and I have had some disagreements, but there's always been respect there. Exactly. And, it's not about going out and shouting at people. You get much more done by working with people and finding the middle ground than you do by going out and yelling at them. And that's kind of my view of the approach we need to take at local government, is to work constructively, because we're going to have different governments of different kinds over the course of a term, over the course of multiple terms, and we need to be able to work with everyone. That's my view. Peter, any reflections from you?
I'd love to see that view in council. And we've got a couple of councillors with that view now, but it's just they're outnumbered.
That's the problem. We talk about a united team in there, and that's a respectful team. We talk to each other. Look, I've also got a background in basically ecology, environment. I like to see the built and natural environments taken care of. And so obviously, I would talk, and I think as a council, we should talk about the environment and what we can do. And I mention that because I just seem to remember an example where this megaphone diplomacy rubbish, which I think Stephen alluded to, you know, not just between nations, but also local council and state government. I remember one incident of it, I'll just mention it briefly, and that was to do with the environment, where I don't know who it was on council, but the council called upon the state government to do more or something, some kind of rubbish megaphone thing in the past. And I'm thinking, well, did you actually go and talk to state government and talk about the importance of things and actually, you know, try and work together to bring something about? Because what you get with that megaphone stuff is people getting their backs up against the walls. It's not diplomacy. It's not a way to actually operate. So I don't know if you remember that one, Paul, but I distinctly remember that I'd sort of pricked my ears up because it was about the environment. And I thought, well, you know, this ridiculous strong stand and calling out the state government, it doesn't matter what flavour the state government is. And, you know, I'm an independent. I don't think major party politics should be involved in local government. It doesn't matter who's in state government. You go, you work with them to get the best outcome. And I remember that one because I thought this is bad for the environment. You know, if something was positive was going to happen, well, there's a good chance now it may not happen with that approach.
Yeah, look, I try and make sure that partisan politics doesn't get involved in anything for Frankston, and certainly I have had, obviously I'm a Labor politician, but I've had Labor councillors from other councils come up and say, hey, I'm Labor, you're Labor. And I sit there and go, so what? You know, tell me about your ideas. Tell me about how we're going to move Frankston or your district forward. That incident you're talking about was another example, though, of no community consultation. So it was a letter to state and federal governments basically telling us we need to declare a state of emergency, or state of emergency for the environment, I think, or something like that. And a councillor got on radio, and unfortunately, I think it was Virginia Trioli, who's a great interviewer, just said, "Oh, so you know, what was community consultation? Oh, we did community consultation. Oh, tell us about this." In the end, there was no community consultation. And okay, can you tell us what this means for Frankston Council then? Oh, well, nothing. We're just asking another level of government to do something, which there is quite a bit happening in the Victorian sector as far as renewables and whatnot. So yeah, proactive, probably not. Waste of time. I wouldn't go that far, but sometimes a cup of coffee and a chat can be really good too. And you know, I opened my doors straight away to the new councillors to try and get that relationship going, because when we all work together, that's when Frankston thrives.
Thank you, Paul. Sue, your reflections.
Yeah, well, as you're talking, one thing I've noticed since nominating is how many organisations have been emailing or phoning to ask questions, which basically are trying to identify what party I'm aligned to, and I'm really curious about it, because clearly, as a councillor, Paul, you've clarified, you know, we make decisions when we're in the council chamber. We have to have an open mind. It's the community as a whole that we listen to, not to any party politics. So I'm wondering, you know, whether people really actually don't fundamentally understand the role of council, or whether there are groups out there that are trying to influence councillors. It's I don't know, it's a bit chicken and egg, I suppose, is what I'm observing. Yeah. So I've really had to practice my response to that in terms of, you know, I'm independent, I'll make decisions on the basis of merit and community feedback when I'm in the council chamber. So that's all I I don't know what your comments are about these.
I think there's a number of lobby groups out there with their own projects that they would like to get up. There are various merits, and they would like councillors to back them in. Look, I think, you know, it's a privilege to serve your community, and you've got to know that your community isn't serving you, you're serving them. So you've got to listen to them. And lobby groups are very important, but also they've got to be able to show their level of community consultation and how they've worked to get to this effort too. You know, it was not so long ago that, you know, car parking has been a front page thing for how many years in Frankston. But we did a study. I chair the Frankston Revitalisation Board. We did our own study, and basically said that, yeah, look, car parking is a problem, but it's not the problem you think it is. It's not about lack of car parking. It's about the way it's structured, and people want to pay for it or not pay for it and whatnot. Some councillors pushed and they said, no, we want a payment in lieu for developers that can't provide this many car parks. We want this, we want that, we want the other. They just spent 30 grand on a car parking study, independent car parking study. It's come back and it's basically said they're wrong. Yet we haven't seen any policy change. And I can tell you now that so many opportunities to revitalise Frankston have been missed. So many. We've done so much in Frankston, it's been positive, but we could have done so much more with people just looking at the facts and going, hey. So in that way, negativity is just such a big enemy in council. As soon as things get toxic, the strategy goes out the window. The vision for Frankston goes out the window. And I think that's what we've seen this time around. It's embarrassing to have a monitor. It's embarrassing to have the local government inspectorate look at individuals for their behaviour. But in that focus of Frankston, and I mean, I'm looking behind you, Peter, at your screen, and yours too, Stephen, with this beautiful foreshore and the CBD coming together. All that is missed in the media because one or two people are doing silly things.
That's right.
Excuse me, look, I just have to ask, a lot of opportunities have been missed. Can you flesh that out a little bit? You know, why have they been missed?
Well, how about I give you some examples? A very recent example. Well, how about I pose you all a question and the people at home can actually decide how you answer it. Is up to you, but they can decide what they think. So if I said to you that been working my absolute butt off to get an opportunity to decentralise a government department and bring it down to Frankston Council officers are all over it, love it, because part of the Frankston Council strategy going forward is jobs for Frankston. So this would bring 100 plus jobs to Frankston, and we would put a building somewhere. What would you say if I said that to you? I mean,
yes.
And I'm talking in principle, obviously. Okay. Well,
you know, the people of Frankston want central Frankston revitalised. Right. So that means jobs. It means food on the ground. So yes.
But you can't revitalise a city if you don't have people.
Exactly.
And the only way to get people is to have jobs. And I think then move towards mixed use development within the CBD area. So you've got more residential people coming in there. You look at what's happened with the Melbourne CBD, where 20 years ago, there might have been 5,000 people living in the Melbourne CBD. Now there's upwards of 30,000 living in the Melbourne CBD. That's made a huge difference to the vitality of that city.
And this is in Frankston's plan, Stephen. This is in Frankston Council's plan to basically do that, and we are well on our way. So, Peter, what would you say to that, and Sue, what would you say to that in principle?
I'll let Sue go first.
Well, in principle, it sounds a great idea. I mean, as soon as you have more people coming into the city, there's more call for the restaurants, the cafes, the shopping. There's an energy, a buzz. People might stay on after work and have something to eat. You know, it then lends itself to how do people want to use the whole area. Might they go down to the beach after work, or are they traveling by train somewhere, or I don't know. I just think there's more energy with more people, so it would absolutely be a let's find out more and yes, I guess.
Yes, it's almost a no-brainer. You do that along with other things, and you've got to have a vision for bringing more people there. I like the idea of Frankston not being a place that you bypass or you try and get through somehow. It's a destination. A destination.
Yeah.
So,
well, let me add some more detail to this. And this opportunity has gone to another electorate now. Unfortunately, it has. But the opportunity was, hey, council, with your approval, what we will do, and state will fund it, is build a Department of Justice building right between the police station and the courts on Evelyn Street, I think it is. Fletcher Road there, and block of land. Great idea. Over 100 jobs straight into Frankston, and we know from South East Water, regardless of what you think of the building and whatnot, people from South East Water are actually moving to Frankston now. Young families, see Frankston, they love it. So that was knocked back on the premise. I'm not sure what the first premise was, but I brought it up a second time. I got the opportunity a second time about a year later. Brought it up again. No, we want to park. So I've never heard anyone say they want to park between the police station and the courts with a park that's a couple of 100 meters away anyway. But we chose a park instead. They're the missed opportunities I'm talking about, Brad.
But surely, sorry, Paul, but surely, logic would dictate that, a Department of Justice building in a precinct that is focused on justice, policing and the courts, it beggars belief that anyone would say no to that.
Well, the kick in the guts for me when I'm already crying in my coffee is state government, can we have a couple of $1 million to build the park?
Yeah.
So, there's this, council's got a plan and we need to stick to that plan. The new council need to stick to that plan. And that is building up Frankston, not making ad hoc shotgun decisions.
No.
That would have been a huge deal. We've had developments in Frankston too that have been knocked back for quite ridiculous reasons that could have been talked at and could have been compromised as well. I'm not talking about making Frankston the Gold Coast and Cavill Avenue. No one wants that. But getting people living in our CBD is what will bring our CBD alive, much like you've been talking about, Stephen. And that's part of that overall Young Street redevelopment, the station, Chisholm. And again, these are things that, unless it's been in a negative sense, I haven't seen much councillor advocacy for Young Street getting done, which was promised for many years, the train station, Chisholm Stage 2. I mean, we're talking over 100 mil just for Chisholm. I've just got to reiterate that you're there for the community. I make thousands of calls every year, and they're cold calls just to ask people, hey, are we doing a good job? Can we do better? What do you want?
Brad, you've been on council before. When you talk about that kind of community engagement and community consultation, and then how that's then fed back through to both state and federal levels, what was your experience at the time, and what would be some of the ways in which you would see community engagement and participation change?
There's, I guess there's a couple of facets here. The first thing I'd say is that proper community consultation is really a science. It is it isn't just chucking up a few questions on Facebook. It isn't just it's making sure your questions aren't leading questions. It's making sure the questions are reaching all the demographics within Frankston. You've got, that's why when you do a survey, they ask you, are you between this age or that age, and what's suburb you live in, because they want to make sure that the whole scope of the community is engaged. The problems start arising when that process isn't really followed. I've seen councillors who have tried to dictate what the questions have to be, and I haven't had any councillors, at least when I was there, who are really across that science of community consultation. We've ended up with leading questions. We've ended up with a skewed answer. That's what ought to happen with proper community consultation. And when you're talking about the amounts of money that we are, right, you need to be making your decisions according to evidence. The other type of consultation is when you get councillors, particularly ones who have been there for a while, who have this idea that I'm in touch with the community. I've been a councillor X amount of years. I know what the community want, right? We don't really have to spend the time on that process because, I'm in touch. People ring me and they tell me these are the lines that come out of their mouths.
Is this why we have yacht clubs that are empty for 4 or 5 years, Brad, and houses that cost $4 million that are...
and look, we need the evidence to make decisions when we're talking about, a budget of $180 million a year. It's not a group of councillors around a table. I want this, I want that, and yeah. Look, I'm probably off track a little bit, but we need to use the council officers who have that expertise, who have that knowledge, who have the resources and the time to put into these consultations to properly formulate our spending priorities of our hard-earned rates.
Just
Couldn't agree more.
Just say something there if I could, Stephen.
Yeah.
I agree with Brad. You need to use the council officers, and Paul mentioned that too. It'd be good to have some councillors there who actually had some understanding of, what I call ethnographic research methods, which is a sort of what we're talking about. Consultation here is a sort of a research method where you do collect evidence and you don't try and push a barrow, as Brad sort of pointed out. Yeah, the yacht club's one of an interesting issue. We probably shouldn't carry on about it, take too long. But that's why that sort of thing happens. It's they don't do it properly. They actually have people have barrows to push, and they don't really consult in a meaningful way. Those disasters will occur. We don't want it.
Can I look? I'd just like to make one point where Paul mentioned the Department of Justice and the space there that they decided to be a park. They did take that out to public consultation, right? But the question that was asked in the consultation is, would you like this to be a park?
Leading question.
Yeah.
Yes or no? So, who will answer no to that, right? There was no mention of the alternative of the jobs of the, the office space. You could have sold that land off, taken the jobs, stuck the money into a chunk of land in central Frankston, right? Perhaps even added a little bit more in if you had to. Have a park in, in Wells Street or wherever it is. But the public was never asked if they would like that, right? Yeah. So it's you've ended up with this situation that's a debacle, really. And now the jobs have gone somewhere else, and we don't have the open space in Middle Frankston. Did you know at the last council meeting, they voted to sell off a chunk of land in the middle of Frankston?
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Right, and then they could have purchased the property next door to that, demolished the lot, and then have some open space.
Yeah,
I think there's probably three. So if I can just take a tangent for a second, I just want to mention one thing, and that is, it's good to see Sue here and someone that's obviously got some experience in governance, because I have had many conversations with some women who would be great in council, but they're not interested in copying what they see people have copped this time around in council. And I don't blame them. They're too busy. They've got families, and the same with men. But we need more women on council, and that is a huge issue. But what it comes down to is we need some strong leadership. We need people that want to serve their community and actually just say, those well-worn words and say them every night in the mirror before they go into a council meeting. The standard I walk past is the standard I accept. Because this council election, the standard you vote for is the standard we are going to get. And we can choose some really, really good people. There are some great candidates standing for this election, which holds us in really good stead, and I'm very, very positive. But there are some people I think that want to take that role of custodian for Frankston, and perhaps may I suggest that it might just be for the $39,000, which if you're doing your job right, that's not a lot of money for what councillors do. But it isn't good enough. We need to vote in people that have actually had maybe a career or a studying, that can actually compromise with people and run a meeting. And what we're seeing is some pretty childish kind of behaviour, which you can say, and I'm sure people say to me, we see that in state and federal parliaments too. Yeah, you do, but it's all theatre in question time and all that. It's really theatre. A lot of I'm very good friends with a lot of the Liberals, where there's great respect there, but the toxicity we see in the council chamber, it's not conducive to getting things done for Frankston. So you know, it's sad in a way. I wish we had more women standing as candidates this time around. I hope we do next time. But for that to happen, I think there's going to have to be some improvements.
Thank you, Paul. I might just throw it to you, but you and I have spoken about how leadership defines the culture of an organisation and a community, and you've had some first-hand experience of trying to build culture through your professional experience. Just wondering if you could perhaps comment on that reflection.
Yeah, I mean, well, setting the tone is very important, and with councillors, I understand it, working with the CEO is a critical relationship within the whole team. So understanding what his aspirations are for the whole of the council and how those values that are currently in place can be brought to life. You know, demonstrate role modelling great leadership, being very focused on the strategy, the council plan, tying everybody's decision making and thinking back into that is really important, rather than having, you know, very pet projects that seem to suck oxygen and distract conversations from the bigger issues that need to be decided on. So I think that sort of leadership role for all councillors, the mayor working with the CEO for the community is really important, because that then builds trust in the community that they will be heard, they will be listened to. I think some of the figures I've seen on community participation seem to me quite low, that you're not getting as many people getting involved, putting their hand up, raising questions. I often hear a bit of deference in people submitting to council. You know, that's a very subjective comment, but in that sort of relationship between councillors and submitters in meetings, to me, it doesn't sound like a very equal, respectful relationship. And I think that's very important to, you know, demonstrate to voters that and community members that we really do want their voice to be heard, because I'm not able to make a decision unless I know what it is. So I think there's quite a few things around the culture and the style of behaving, leading, that perhaps needs to be changed. We talked about disruptors at the start of our conversation, maybe off camera, but you know, that then perhaps needs to be a bit of disruption to the style and the energy that's brought that shows people things can be different, and it really is possible to behave differently, and therefore you have different outcomes. Because if you always do what you've always done, you're always going to get what you've always got. So, you know, it's really time to do something different, and that takes a little bit of courage and a little bit of nerve, but I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Look, this is why it's even more critical that people actually do their research before voting in this election, because we don't want a repeat of the past, and we want a sort of strong, positive future for Frankston. I'm really conscious of time, and I do want to come back to some of the comments and questions from our viewers today. Oliver Hill's asked quite a good one, might be a bit of a prickly one for you, Paul, but has asked about the, you know, when we're looking at big projects, is what the environmental considerations are, and that one's, you know, how do we get that balance right? I should flag that Glenn Cooper has also at the same time flagged more fishing, which may upset Oliver as well, because we all know about kind of fish stock issues in the West Ward. But Paul, in terms of where you sit at a state level, how do you look at that balance of, you know, the environment and sort of big projects, and knowing that, you know, council still has a role to play in that as well?
Yeah, look, I think it comes down to what we've been talking about before, and that is community consultation at first. You know, why are we proposing projects that could potentially damage our environment, or possibly we could strike a balance without the community actually asking for them? Is it a developer in the background? You know, someone owns some land or something? But when we do get to the stage where, you know, take the marina for example, there's a good reason to have the marina. There's an argument not to have the marina, but it's about actually having the evidence. If you don't have the foundation of evidence, how can you make a decision? Now we've got the federal government's got themselves in an interesting, I guess, dilemma of sorts with Baxter electrification at the moment, because that was something that was promised in 2019. DL flyers out saying we will build it. And I don't get me wrong, I support Baxter, but the level of consultation with the local councils was obviously non-existent, because we've got Moynton Council saying, well, we want it to go down to Hastings, or we don't want it all because we don't want to break up Green Wedge. To actually get these large projects off the ground, it is a lot of work. And Frankston Hospital is a great example of that, having to deal with some environmental concerns, parking concerns, different stakeholders, a tennis club. There's a lot of things to deal with. But the key to it all is actually having the consultation, having the data and the correct facts and figures. And, that way you can hold your ground as well and say, well, no, if you've got another argument, you need to present what it is and what facts you've got. As far as, things that affect our environment, well, our environment is our jewel in the crown in Frankston, our beach, and for people fishing as well. I'm not saying it's just to look at, but it is our jewel in the crown. And, we need to take that very seriously. We, as a municipality, draw a lot of money from tourism outside COVID, of course. And, that's one of the tenets that we're working on in Frankston at the moment, is bringing people back to Frankston to get them spending money in our local businesses. And this is the big picture. If we lose that, if we somehow make mistakes and destroy that based on rubbish decisions that were just popular at the time because one person was a member of some party and another person was a member of the same party, and they got together, and this is where bad decisions happen. So what it comes down to, as I've said, is just rock solid community consultation, and like Brad said, it is a science. And you do have to engage everyone and all types, and making sure you've got the evidence, and the evidence should take you where you need to go.
Thank you for that, Paul. And I think one of the reflections I take from this whole conversation is that the first job of the new council coming in, irrespective of who's elected, is to really kick in behind a shared vision for Frankston, and then stick to that for the full term, and then work really deeply with the community to make sure we're getting the right outcomes, as well as making sure that then can fit in with policy alignment at the state and the federal level as well. Because I think even if you're trying to do something that doesn't necessarily fit neatly with either a state or federal level policy, you can nuance it in a way so that it still can still be acceptable to those other levels of government as well.
And to go back to the question, I think one of you posed before, I think it was you, Stephen, about it was Sue, about the conduits and being able to talk to different levels of government. I can tell you now, at times it has been difficult because you want to talk to councillors. You want to ensure that they are part of your project, you're part of their projects, and you're working together on projects. But we seriously have a councillor in South Ward, and his name's Steve Toms, and he's being charged with serious misconduct. He's been he's been laid off council for 4 months for bullying a colleague. There's, rorting ratepayer cab charges, all this kind of stuff, allegedly hassling council officers over a parking ticket, $1,200 odd 3-month phone bills. It is very hard to meet with people like that, because I wouldn't put up with that when I was a firefighter or a teacher. I wouldn't put up with that now in my office, and I sure as hell wouldn't meet with someone who's on charges like that. So it does make it really difficult. As we said before, the behaviour you vote for is the behaviour you accept. And we've got to look out for people that can bring positivity to Frankston. And like you mentioned, Stephen, make sure that they're part of the bigger plan. They're just not nibbling around the sides, white-anting their colleagues, or all this kind of stuff, because it doesn't get us anywhere. I have no idea how this person is actually running. I mean, how can you talk to a state member when your parliamentary services won't even let you in their office? So this is, it's different, because this is council democracy. There's local government democracy, and it's not, if that person was an employee, they'd be sacked. There's no doubt about it. But we've got to make sure the local government inspectorate do the right thing and do that independently. But certainly this time around, we have a chance to elect people that can do great good for Frankston. We're in a fantastic space. We're in a fantastic space. Despite COVID, it is, you know, I know a lot of people are hurting. I know personally a lot of people are hurting, but Frankston is going places, and it's been going places for quite a while. It's just people are starting to notice now. There's been a lot of investment and a lot of different policies at council and especially state government level to make this happen. And it'd be, you know, I'm sitting here talking to you, thinking, wow, I would have loved 4 years of a conversation like this over a council table. I really would have. And I wish you all the very best of luck. If I can though, but because just because I've been approached, I'd love to actually ask you the question. You know, you're running, you're putting your skin in the game. Obviously, you've got a thick skin too, because that's what it will take. But you know, I've watched some. I read some candidate documents the other day, and there was like a CV, I guess, and people are telling you why they're invested and why they're good for the role. If I can, I'd love to give each of you 30 seconds just to tell me and the people out there watching in Frankston the answer to a really simple question. And I think it's probably got two parts, but and I'll put the timer on too, like my mate Glenn Cooper does.
You're doing a Glenn Cooper special.
Glenn Cooper special. God love him. And the question is, it's pretty simple, but I think people out there want to hear it. And that is, name one tangible goal you will achieve for Frankston in your term, and one long-term vision you'll work towards for Frankston if given the privilege of being elected as one of our councillors. So name one tangible goal that you want to get done in 4 years. And remember, Frankston's doesn't end in 4 years. It's not about 4 year or 3 year federal terms. You know, we've got a long-term vision. So name a short-term goal that you will achieve and a long-term vision that you're going to work towards when as you're a councillor, if you're given the privilege of being elected. So maybe we'll go from on my screen right to left. And Brad, do you want to give it a crack? I'll count you in. Go.
Thank you. Short-term goal. Well, look. Number one is to establish a relationship with the councillors, right? And that's establish the team. After that, though, I think we need a good look at the budget in the short term. We'll need to identify what the rates are being spent on, how we can provide relief to ratepayers. So when we're elected, we're going to be starting a new process to develop a budget, probably about February, which will be delivered by mid-year. Longer term, I want to see a basic focus on services, hard rubbish. I'd like to deliver tip vouchers. I'd like to see the invigoration of the Frankston Town Centre. I want to see reasonable development, appropriate development.
Beautiful, and that's what I like to see. Someone who can't be stopped.
Yeah.
So that was a minute because I didn't want to interrupt at all. Sue, we'll give you a minute too. So you're answering what's one tangible thing you would achieve for Frankston in your time as councillor, and also one vision, or what long-term vision are you working towards in Frankston as a councillor if given the privilege?
Okay, so for me, it is setting up the councillor team to be a team and to establish their reputation as a council that really is invested in Frankston. There are so many projects that the existing council have started and got underway, and I think it will be really important to show some continuity and get some energy behind following through with those projects, be it sports grounds, be it community groups, be it all the sorts of different projects that are in train. Longer term for me, it really is establishing this 2040 vision. I would really love to work with council to get that established, because I think with a clear picture, people can then start to invest themselves. So businesses, community groups, individuals can make decisions about their year 2, 5-year, 10-year plans for their lives around Frankston as a place to live and work.
I have to stop you there, Sue. you've got council's advertising campaign there, Live, Work, Play in Frankston.
Oh, have I?
Well done. All
Certainly.
right, Peter. So one tangible goal you want to achieve for Frankston in the short term, and a long-term vision that you're working towards if you are given the privilege of being elected to Frankston Council.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that we will be able to get a good, coherent teamwork council, set of councillors together. We have to do that. Strong leadership is one of my things, and teamwork. So certainly we're going to establish that straight up. I like the idea of the 2040 as a long-term vision. I also like the idea of having a bit of a 10-year projection as well, because it's in that 10 years you want to get a lot done towards the 2040 vision. As far as definitive or definite projects, certainly stage 2 of TAFE, where I am, work with state government to really get that done. But on the other side of town, nearer the beach, there's the Boulevard entry to Frankston project, which I think is really needed. You get the connection between the two with the hospital, health precinct and Monash University. You've got a flow through of greater numbers.
10 seconds, Peter.
Greater number of students coming through, connecting Frankston together, giving sort of a lot of revitalisation to the business and the greater community.
Beautiful. Thanks, Peter. It's almost like you've been reading the Frankston Council and Revitalisation Board strategy.
got to act on it. Got to do action. Action is important.
Yeah, look, we need a lot more action than words, that's for sure, at local government level. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Others have already said it, but I think getting a hard reset on the council culture is going to be critical, and that will then cascade through the whole of the council organisation and hopefully into the wider community. Some of the things I'd like to see happen much more immediately are going to be things like modifying the planning scheme so that we can have mixed use residential and commercial within the central activity district, and making sure that we lobby you to try and get more decentralisation of government departments, bring more jobs in, which will then encourage more private sector growth. I think post-COVID, the way we work is going to be very, very different, and there's going to be much more opportunity for sort of hub working for people and remote working as well. And I think Frankston's in a uniquely well-placed position for that. In terms of long-term, I think there's going to be a lot of work that's going to have to be done to help support our community voluntary and sporting sector within the city as well. There are a lot of them are feeling a lot of pain right now, but that's then got to feed into a broader strategic vision for Frankston, which I think comes back to that 2040 plan. But we want to have clear milestones on the way through that help to show people that there is momentum building, and that Frankston, when I'm retiring, or when some others on this call might be retiring, we know that we've got a place that is a real legacy for not just ourselves, but for our kids as well.
You got to say, you're an impressive bunch. It'd be lovely to work with you, and that's, I know that we won't always agree on everything if you become councillors, but the respectful manner in which you carry yourselves is something I'm not always used to. We'll just put it that way. Someone did just text me then and say that there was a question on the car park. So the car park at Frankston Station. So if I can, I'll just give you a quick update on that. So there was some initial geotech work done. Essentially, we're hoping work can start very soon. We're still working out with that geotech data, where is the best place for it. And we're having some discussions with council about that as well, but that will be soon. So that's 500 car parks at Frankston Station for commuters. So
great, thank you very much, Paul. And if I can just ask us all just to give a very warm vote of thanks to Paul for coming on and joining us for this discussion. So
thank you very much.
Okay, very good.
No worries, guys, and I wish you all luck, as I wish all candidates luck, but more power to you for actually getting in touch prior to the election. I hope I'm able to work with you when and if you get elected. Look, it's a hard journey you've undertaken, but I think you, from what I actually watched a little snippet of your Facebook live last week, and you were talking a little bit about your past, and I think we've got an experienced group of people here, and I hope in some of the other wards, I think we've got 3 people here for South Ward and 1 for Northwest. I hope we've got some other people in the other wards with just the same amount of passion, commitment, and experience to help Frankston get along, because we really are in a good place, and it's so positive to be on or live on Facebook with you today, talking about how good Frankston could be. I think we can't ignore where we've come from though, because we don't want to repeat that history. It's been a bit unfortunate, been a bit of a letdown. Frankston being on the front pages for the activities of 1 or 2 people when we've got so much good stuff happening. And I want to be there sharing it with you. So good luck. And I think you can campaign via putting things in people's letterboxes and everything from here on in. So I don't envy you that. I've done a bit of that myself, but good luck.
Good exercise.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for being so generous with your time. I won't give space for the wrap-up comment because we're already well over time, but thank you to Brad, Sue and Peter. We're back on Sunday for our Sunday sessions, much more relaxed format. It's like insiders without the politics. Right. And we'll look forward to talking to you then. Next Tuesday, we're talking environment. Yeah. And look forward to having you guys back. As I've already said, I've reached out across the city to connect with other candidates, and hopefully from Sunday, whisper is we might have a couple of candidates from other wards also joining us. So thanks very much, everyone. Thank you again, Paul. Stay safe, Frankston, and enjoy the weekend.
Good.